Hey everybody, my name's Ed. Okay, so for today's trade, we are going to look at the Golden Age from 1995. This was originally a 93-94 Prestige miniseries written by James Robinson, known for Starman, with art by Paul Smith, mostly known for, or most famous for his X-Men work. It's a story about a DC Comics Golden Age heroes and what happens to them after World War II. The characters are older. They have to deal with post-war traumas as well as a growing threat to America. Okay, so the plot is basically World War II ends and many of the superheroes have gotten older and they're retired or semi-retired. One of the heroes, Tex Thompson, has become a senator and is claiming to bring America into a new era. Many of his heroes are dealing with trauma. Like, for example, Green Lantern is a businessman who still has his ring, but he has to resist using it. The Manhunter has been having disturbing dreams. Johnny Quick is trying to live a normal life. Starman is trying to revive his scientific glory. We see other examples of former heroes struggling to adapt to civilian life. And meanwhile, Tex recruits Daniel Dunbar, the former sidekick of a hero who's passed away and has become a superhero of the new age. And some of the other heroes are skeptical, but the public buys into Tex's campaign speeches. Slowly, we learn that Tex has some sinister secrets, as long as one of the other major players that connects to the recently ended war. There's a shocking twist ending, but ultimately the story does end on a hopeful note. The story touches on real history, where the Justice Society of America has to deal with issues like the McCarthy hearings. The heroes have PTSD that mirrors that of real ex-soldiers. And in a meta text, you can say it also mirrors how the superhero genre in general kind of fell out of popularity after the end of World War II. Okay, now the Golden Age is not set in the mainstream DC superhero comics canon. The story's not quite a deconstruction of the superhero genre, but it does tiptoe right up to that edge. The main characters talk about aging. They question how silly their old costumes and approach to crime fighting were. We see characters dealing with issues of marriage and mental health that weren't common in older mainstream superhero comics. Especially, we didn't associate these subjects with comics or characters from the 40s. But I'd say post Miracle Man and post Watchmen, readers started to see more such things in comics in the late 80s and early 90s. So just to put this in a broader context of certain other comics that were being done and deconstruction and grim and gritty and stuff like that. So I'd say in the 80s, there was this trend of comics that, like I said, deconstructed the superhero genre and helped, along with other mainstream comics that were aimed at older fans that took on darker themes, kind of create the whole sort of grim and gritty era of comics. So some of these deconstruction comics included, but not limited to, things like Miracle Man, Watchmen, Brat Pack, Martial Law, and to a certain degree, Dark Knight Returns. These comics basically took apart the absurdities of superhero genre while still being superhero comics as opposed to doing outright parody. These comics sometimes added extremes in violence and sex, and some used them to satirize the genre, and some took these elements and played them straight. Some were pretty self-aware, but others were just doing shock value. Another interesting thing is how the Golden Age compares to Kingdom Come, which came out in 1986, and New Frontier from 2004, which are a couple other comics that look at older heroes in a different way. So all three stories, I'd say, kind of reassert the stature and respect of old school superheroics, but use different paths to arrive at that point. So the Golden Age is about Golden Age heroes. So these are superheroes from the 40s, and this is kind of a period piece set in the 50s. New Frontier is about the emergence of the Silver Age generation of heroes. So this would be superheroes that came out in the 50s and 60s. That's the period piece as well. And then Kingdom Come is about older Silver Age heroes coming out of retirement to confront the newer grim and gritty generation, and it was set in the then modern times of the 90s. I'd say the difference is that Golden Age is sort of a re-examination of the older heroes through a darker lens that fits kind of in with the grim and gritty trend of the era of when it was published, while Kingdom Come and New Frontier are more a reconstruction of the traditional superheroes, perhaps through a more sophisticated, mature lens, and seems to be a direct reaction to the Dark Age. So now Robinson and the Smith story does touch on, again, getting back to, get back into the core of the story. It touches on, excuse me, the post-war generation getting older and taking on different responsibilities, as well as the stress that people face as middle-aged people. So we see the heroes being alienated and struggling to fit in with civilian society, some wanting to move forward but unsure how. These issues that the so-called greatest generation had to wrestle with post-war, something that's occasionally addressed in pop culture, although not super frequently. So it's interesting to see it in a superhero comic. Now, I'd also say, as far as the actual superheroics are concerned, there's a fair amount of action and suspense, but I'd really say the story is still more of an ensemble character piece. The focus is more on the personal issues that the characters are going through, but the writing does do a decent job of building suspense and tension until the mysteries are revealed, and there is a big action set piece at the climax. So this was a 4-issue miniseries, and it does a good job of pacing the story and balancing out the characterizations and plots. It feels like something that worked in a serialized way, but it also works when you read it in one setting. Now, getting to the art, Paul Smith's art is slick and it revolves around simple line work. It's not super technical rendering, but it's good, solid superhero art in a traditional sense. So we get some nice, clear layouts, decent work with anatomy and fabrics and settings and backgrounds, and good stuff when it comes to kinetic action scenes. So the panels move along in a fine sense. The coloring with Richard Ori is interesting. But it looks like they were trying to take advantage of more sophisticated production values. But some of the nuances of the color graduations or grading, I should say it that way, graduations, I don't know, don't always come off, at least not in my version. And in some places, it looks a little muddy. In a few places, it's hard to read the captions against the dark art. And now, as far as continuity is concerned, now my copy says Elseworlds, and Elseworlds was DC Comics' alternative world storyline where they explored different takes on the characters or told stories that didn't quite fit into the regular canon. So you have stuff where, like, what if Superman was raised in Cold War Russia, or Batman versus Jack the Ripper, or the Justice League of America as Western heroes, etc. But with this one, with a few tweaks, I think it could have worked as main continuity. But here, let me show you some of the art here. Just really quickly. Okay. Just really nice, kind of simple stuff here. That's all kind of here. You see the layouts are really easy to follow. But here you can tell, like I said, they're trying for some variations in complexity in the coloring, and it looks a little muddy there. You know what I mean? Here it's pretty cool, but like I said, just simple, straightforward stuff, but it really works. Right? But here, it's like, what's going on here, That's why I say, like, some of this stuff, especially this darker stuff, it might have worked better if they just used flat colors, right? Yeah, okay. I don't want to give too much of it away. But here, like, decent action stuff. And here, this is just two regular guys fighting. But he's able to, Smith is able to pull it off in a way that I think a lot of sort of, this is the 90s, Rob Liefeld type guys wouldn't have been able to pull off these more simple scenes, or ordinary scenes, I should put it this way, civilian scenes, stuff like that. All right, okay, so I don't want to give too much of it away. All right, but just good, solid stuff. Good, solid stuff. All right. Okay, so to wrap it up, The Golden Age by James Robinson and Paul Smith is an interesting comic. It doesn't fit easily into continuity, but it's an interesting take on post World War II malaise, aging, first generation superheroics. Good writing that includes sympathetic characters wrestling with both public and private issues. The comic also has solid traditional art by Paul Smith with clean lines and decent layouts and storytelling. The coloring by Richard Ori is okay. Ironically, like I said, it could have been better if it was simpler. Ultimately, Golden Age is a interesting blend of real world history and superheroics and comic books meta text, which has become an interesting evergreen trade from DC Comics. Okay, so then that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for listening. I do appreciate it. You guys all have a great day. Thank you.